Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Between the Lanes, and you might notice something just a little bit different this week. If you're watching, if you're listening, you're about to hear something a little bit different. But I've got right now, sitting next to me, the way better half, at least of this part of the lanes. Miss Blynda Lane is with me this week. So Between the Lanes is going to look a little different because my dad is not with us this week, and Blynda is stepping in. So we still got Between the Lanes, it's just these lanes, all right?
It's a different kind of lane.
Different lanes, and we have a really fun and hopefully insightful, energetic, joyful episode because we got some good friends with us this week, and it's David and Mikayla Blease.
Hello.
Hey guys.
We're so excited.
We're so glad y'all are here.
Thank you.
And really the point of this week's episode is a fun conversation between, let me say it this way, babe, sadly two different generations of marriages and families. And I think it's hard for us to believe that we might actually be.
We're on the side of the older.
We're the older couple.
In this conversation.
In this conversation.
No,
Not
we're finding that it's in most conversations.
It's becoming more and more. Like, I don't know where everybody else older than us is gone. But somehow we are here, and here we find ourselves. And so, first off, I don't want to presume everybody who is listening, watching, even, has really seen you yet. So I want to stop and go, hey.
Probably no Between the Lanes people would know me. So
Yes.
I'm so happy to
This is
be
your first
here.
time on
Thank
the-
you
on
for
the
welcoming me so
podcast.
well. I know.
Okay, so tell everybody how long we've been married.
28 years just in December.
And tell everybody how long we've been happily married.
About 21.
Hey, 21 out of 28 isn't bad. I mean,
that's
right?
good.
That's
Just
about,
kidding.
is that 3/4?
28 blissful years, honey.
Blissful years, yes.
Yes.
We've learned a lot.
Yes.
And we've learned a lot of what to do. And I think on the scale.
And you've learned a lot about what not to do.
I have learned a lot about what not to do. You're exactly right. And so, so it's fun having you on.
Aw,
I'm glad. I don't sit with Dad like this on
I
the
know.
podcast.
I was going to say this
So
this feels a little cozy.
Yeah,
I hope it's
that's what we like.
just unique to me.
It is unique to you, I promise.
Good.
Okay, so
good.
but yes, we do have guests also here,
Yes,
and so
we're so happy.
So-
you guys have some time. This is good.
I know, we
We're
love
learning.
this.
could
We're
you
learning.
give us a moment?
Sure.
Yeah, right, exactly. You guys, let's see your moment. Okay, so talk to us.
Look how young they are. They're
know.
just so young and spry.
Yes, and
You guys
and
are so sweet.
you guys have a beautiful family. So talk to us about the Blease family.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about so start with how long y'all been married, and maybe if you want to joke about how long it's been happily married, you can use that too. So
Yeah. Well, we're kind of the opposite because we've known each other now for 15.
Maybe 16,
16 years?
16 years.
wow.
So it's like we've been together this long, but we've only been married for this long.
Yeah,
So,
I
Yes,
got you.
I
because
see.
when
But
you're
that's
dating,
when
you
it
got
really
to stretch it
starts.
out. When you talk to someone who's recently been dating, you're like, how long you guys been together? Well, we've been talking
Exactly.
for like
Yes.
3 years. But yes, we've been dating for a week officially. 'Cause, you want it to have some.
Yeah, some
Some
meat.
teasers.
Yes, some
Yeah,
meat.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
So we met I was in 7th grade. She was in 6th grade.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Our parents,
Very young.
yes, their houses were pretty close to each other. Our parents.
Yeah, they're like on the same street.
So we met at the bus stop.
Did you really?
We did.
Yep.
Taking the bus.
Taking the bus
And
to school.
That's
And
really sweet.
This will tell you something about my personality. I would go to different bus stops just because I didn't want to be like boxed in to
You
like.
wanted to go mingle with
I,
all the kids.
I have to go
Nobody's
there.
boxing
Like why?
David
So I would go to like different bus stops. So the first time I met Mikayla, or I guess saw Mikayla,
You're like,
I was
this
already
is my
on the
bus stop forever.
yeah,
I'm
that's true.
stopping here.
Yeah, I was like, new bus stop. But I was already on the bus, and she came on. Now, the context that you have to know about is in middle school, you can't date someone in a different grade.
Of
No.
course
It's
not.
like,
It's like
Oh,
a-
you're talking not unofficially. This is like
yeah,
the
this is
rule.
it's kind of
Yeah.
like it's like written in the psyche of every middle
Right.
schooler. You just know.
Yeah,
Super weird. It becomes fine in high school.
right.
But in middle school,
Sophomore can date a
school.
freshman, but
Yeah.
middle school, 8th grader dating a 7th grader, absolutely.
Yeah. 13-year-old and 12-year-old?
Yeah, no.
That's
No
just
way.
no way.
Can't happen.
That's ridiculous.
I just think there's such a dramatic difference between a 6th grader and an 8th grader.
Yeah.
There
Oh,
is,
that's
like
true.
every year
Sure.
it's so different.
Yes.
So maybe that plays into
That
it. I
plays
don't
into
know.
it for
So
sure. Yes.
I see this beautiful angel walk onto the bus. But my first thought is not like, oh, wow, I'm interested, because she was in 6th grade. I was in 7th grade.
You already knew that? You knew she was a 6th grader at that
Yeah, I
point?
don't know how I knew that, but
Well,
I
because it was
think
the
you know
first day of
everybody in your
school,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
Yeah, you know everybody in your grade, apparently.
You probably had already checked that bus stop too. You're
Yes.
like,
Yeah,
everybody comes
I
on this
knew.
Like,
bus.
I've been
not
scouting
here.
bus stops for years at this point. So she walks on, and my first thought is, wow. And I turned to my friend who was in 6th grade, and I said, you need to date her. Trust me.
Trust me.
She'll be hot when she's older. What's
He
my
said
exact
that.
words?
You know, you were insightful as a
I was
6th grader.
prophetic is what I
We're
was.
talking about
my gosh.
you're 12.
I'm 12.
You're 12 years old. This is
Yes.
hysterical.
Yeah, and so
And that was actually my first time riding a bus to school that day. I was like,
Wow.
my
private
first
school.
day in public school.
And you were
It was a
marked.
big day for me. And David just,
David's-
Yeah, you
David's
did.
wife.
Right.
Very
You just
good.
kind of leaped
yeah,
on this
instantly
moment.
sent my friend to her. Yeah. So that then my 8th grade year, her 7th grade year, this is when I started thinking long term, as leaders
really
do. I know
did.
it's
As
a
leaders
leadership
do in
process.
8th
You got real strategic.
You got very
Yeah.
strategic, and I thought, okay, so when I date, or when I get into freshman year, I definitely can't date her, because a high schooler dating,
High school.
dating a middle
Oh.
schooler,
Oh.
that's even worse.
Loser.
You'll get
Total
kicked out of
loser.
school.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
it's, so then I thought strategically, okay, well, what if I develop a friendship and what I refer to as the foundation?
no, he really coined it. He was like, Mom,
Yeah.
I'm building the foundation.
Yeah, everyone in my family knew, like, oh, he's laying the foundation. Wow.
So were you, and you were always a 40-year-old man when you were 12?
Apparently
I
just
was
trapped in
not
a
even 40.
13-year-old body. Yeah, I was ready.
But honestly, yes.
And so my goal was the foundation's going to be strong. And then my sophomore year, her freshman year, I knew all of the other guys would, finally,
Right.
No.
be
Wake up. How could
ready
you
and
not?
waiting.
Of
Right,
course.
yeah.
But she's going to move them aside because she's going to have this amazing foundation with
Foundation,
David.
yes.
So that day came.
Well, that day came. Can I
And-
say for a quick second that, in hindsight, that looks both a combination of strategic
Yeah.
and creepy.
Yeah, a little
Totally.
bit, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And honestly, the creepy came through because I was like, as much as I was like, oh man, David's so awesome. He developed too strong of a foundation
Very strong.
where he just stayed over in the friend zone for a long
Yeah,
time.
she was like, I can't
while.
date my best friend. I was like,
Backfired.
Back,
the
yeah.
foundation is backfiring. We need to tear up the foundation.
Retract foundation, retract foundation.
We've overcommitted.
Demo. Yeah, he overcommitted.
Jesus never talked about a parable about a too strong a foundation. I would have.
You would have some kind of model of what to do at that point.
But clearly it paid off.
Yeah. So then we started dating in high
I mean,
school.
did you have friends like were doing like giving wedgies and picking their nose? Like I'm so
Like normal
Yes, like
seventh graders?
Yeah.
They were doing that also.
Yeah, it was happening. It was happening. But there was this side of me that was very.
Building a foundation.
I think you always knew what you wanted, and I love that about you. That's one of the qualities I still love about David. He's so consistent, and you really believe. You have strong conviction,
Yeah.
and I think that's one of my favorite things about you.
Yeah.
But we'll go back to the story very briefly. But he laid that foundation so strong that I was like, I don't know, dating my best friend, that's very risky. I don't want to lose you.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been best friends for forever.
Yeah.
That just sounds really risky. I want to be friends for forever. And you have to tell them what you did because it's so funny.
Can I ask first, did the foundation of your relationship develop such that you begin to sit by each other on the bus? I just want to know what happened
We
with the
never
bus.
sat with each other on the bus.
Well, I think you stopped
We
taking the
both-
bus.
We stopped taking the bus in high school.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
guess maybe
I don't
so.
know why, but
Yeah.
we both did.
So no, we didn't sit together. But we genuinely had a great friendship.
But we did at beach camp
we
because
did.
our parents were in the same gym. We went to the same church at the
No,
time.
I told my mom. I said, "That's Mikayla's mom. Go be friends with her. Be friends with her. Be friends
He
with her. Go, 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 go. Invite them to dinner."
and
So
she
this is the
did.
creeper side. And she did.
Yeah, she did.
She
and
was
we had
in on
game
this
night,
with
and I
you.
was
I-
like, "Mom,
I
I love
loved
you
it.
so
And
much."
our parents are still best friends.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what a story.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
loving
that's
this.
pretty
Okay,
amazing.
so when was it? You were telling us something
Yes.
that David did.
Things changed.
Yeah. Although it might sound like I was very strategic and level-headed, or creepy. I don't know what it sounds like. But all of the above. But when she said like, "Well, I can't date my best friend because what are the odds that we like stay together? Odds are we break up and then we're not friends anymore." And I was like, "That's terrible logic.
Yeah.
Like that makes no
That's
sense."
not an option.
Yeah.
So she started talking to this other guy, who was quarterback.
I didn't know we were going that deep into the story.
Yes. Oh, we get to hear the real. Yeah.
Yeah,
let's
this is
give
the,
them
this is the real stuff. Yeah, this is not the question you asked, by the way. You're like, tell us about your family. We're like, well, in 8th grade. So basically, she started talking to this other guy, and I was like, it's ultimatum time. So I said, you basically have to either choose to date this person or choose to date me. But if you date this person, I will never date you.
Wow.
Wow.
Man, that foundation.
Foundation. I set dynamite around the foundation. And I was like,
Exactly.
watch
Watch what happens now.
button.
Well, I ended up pressing the button
Yeah, she
because
was-
I said, fine, I'll choose the other guy.
Yeah. I was like, we backfired again, guys. We are backfiring.
I just didn't want to be told what to do.
Yeah,
I was like,
Michaela does not need an ultimatum.
Yeah,
no,
no,
I
it's
was
not
like, I'm going to
smart.
make my own decisions. And because you pressed so hard, I just had to go the other way.
Yeah, knowing Mikayla as my wife, I would have told high school David, don't do an ultimatum. It's going to backfire.
Nobody
This
back
is not
Michaela
gonna
into a
work.
corner.
No, they don't. But
So she held up her
I did.
decision, and so I had to hold up my end of the bargain.
Oh, no.
So I
Which
didn't,
was no more friendship?
communication,
friendship.
no talking.
Wow.
And that
Oh, it
tore
was
her
heartbreaking.
up,
It tore my
me
heart.
up.
It did because you were like you really did lose a friend.
I really lost a friend, and I guess what I didn't realize at the time was there was always that risk of losing the friend in David's ultimatum scenario or in the world in which we dated and potentially it didn't work out. There was always that risk of losing him, and I'll never forget we were walking down the hallway, and I thought, surely David's not going to hold up to his little bargain plan, and so I saw him, and I did what I always did when I only saw David, which was I opened my arms like this for a hug,
wide.
and David Blease walked
Underneath
under
the
the
arms.
arms and didn't even address me.
Whoa.
He was like
Cold-blooded.
really cold-blooded.
That was cold-blooded, but very,
But I
very
needed
strong.
it. It was very sobering.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, oh, okay, like he's really serious about this. And that led me to a place that really had to think about, okay, like this is what you chose. Like you don't get to choose this other world in which you guys say best friends and you pick this other guy because he very clearly said like, I can't be best friends with you and like you this way. Like it's too hard. And I couldn't play with him and his heart. And I really learned that after that experience.
Hearing the story is like the epitome of high school drama.
It was so
But
dramatic.
awesome.
it's also the epitome. Like, so there may be a lot of folks who like either, you know, I don't know. I actually don't have a clue how much of our audience are teenagers who are listening to this story and going, this applies, but as parents. But I'm curious,
Yeah.
when you look back on, you know, high school, because you were very, I mean, you're a fun-loving guy, and
Yeah.
but it sounded like a very serious-minded guy. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of
So
two
level-headed.
parts. You're like
Yeah.
fun David, and then like
Very-
had a foundation at 8th grade, a
Yeah.
plan for marriage, David.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, even like a couple of weeks ago, we had the King's University had this Q&A about the crisis in Israel. And then the next day I was hosting a game show. And they were like, this is weird. I was like,
Who are you really?
0 to 100 really fast. So I think I do have to balance those
Yeah.
two sides.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You do. I think that's what I love about you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
But we can wrap this story
Yeah,
up for
so
you guys real
basically,
quick.
the cold wall that I had,
Yeah, erected.
erected, was probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks of not talking, and then she had a conversation with her dad
I did.
where he went to bat for me, and
He
was
did.
basically like, "What are you really looking for in a person?
Yeah.
In a man?"
Yeah.
And she, started describing me, and he was like, "Then why are you not going for David?"
Wow.
Meanwhile, I'm sulking at home in my father's bathrobe.
No joke.
Literally.
He really was.
And-
I think he was in the hot tub sad and crying.
And that detail's important because then her dad drops her off at my
I could tell
house.
apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So meanwhile, we had finished this family outing where our families were together having ice cream. And he didn't talk to me the whole time, but he talked to all of my family, my sisters, my parents. And I came home and was just so sad. And that's when this conversation happened between my dad and I. And he said, "What do you see in this other guy?" And I was like, I didn't really have a leg to stand on because he wasn't David. And my whole family during this time just adored him and were like, "We see the writing on the wall. Like, what are you doing?" And he really asked me some hard questions that I'm so thankful that he did because that was my like come to Jesus moment where I realized it's always been David. Like he really does have all the attributes of a man I wanted to marry. And so, yeah, my dad was, I tried to call him, but of course David's holding true to the ultimatum.
Yeah.
And
Can't answer.
I said,
Can't answer
"Dad, like
the phone."
he's not texting me back. He's not answering my phone call, and he lives up the street, and I was like, Dad, you have to drive me over. Like, I have to go tell him. So he drove me over
This is
and
like
dropped
turning
me off.
into like a movie.
I know.
I know.
I'm hearing, like,
I'm
music,
riveting.
like-
Where's
Listen,
the
it's
popcorn?
riveting.
Yeah.
And I knock on the door. I was so nervous. I have a great relationship with his parents at this point in time, and I still do. But I was still really nervous to like see them and be all like sad, and
Yeah.
you know, I just didn't know what to expect. And sure enough, David opened the door in his bathrobe, like down to his bathrobe,
My
like
dad's
down to
dark
his
green,
legs.
thick bathrobe, like back when bathrobes were thick towels.
Did you have a cigar and a
I
and a
would have if I
cognac
had
and-
access to it. I
I
would.
can only imagine your hair too. And did you answer the door
And like some slippers too.
"Oh."
Yeah, and I said, David, I made such a big mistake. I'm so sorry. This whole thing, like, I've always liked you, and I still like you. I don't know how you feel, but this is how I feel. And he tried to hold back the smile, but I saw it out of the corner of the little corner went
It went
up.
up just a little-
just a little.
a micro expression.
And we've been together ever since that day.
Wow.
I was 15 and he was 16.
15
That was
and
2010.
I don't know. We're almost 30 this month.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 29. I will be.
That's, yeah, so half your life.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What a sweet story. And you know what's interesting is we're talking about things that are 7th and 8th grade, which we would kind of laugh at. That's just child's play, you know.
Yeah.
But in your story, because you guys committed your love so early, 15 and
Yeah.
16, you have to go back to talking about 12 and 13-year-olds.
Right. That's where it
As
began.
far back as we can go.
Because so how old were you when you actually got married?
I was 21. You were
20.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I
So
remember
your
I
story
couldn't
is
drink at the wedding, but I was like, "Hey, you're my person, so I can."
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'll allow it. This
You're
time.
one now.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're 21.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, it's such a sweet, fascinating story. And the way you guys tell it, it's like a cute little teenage drama.
it is.
I know. So like, okay, so let's capture, stay in the story for a second, because a couple things that kind of come out. Talk about your dad.
Yeah.
So he played a really important role in helping you navigate. So talk about how so I'm a dad of 2 daughters,
Yeah.
and think about how do I help them navigate through, of course, and a son as well, but I'm thinking
And
that
one
was-
is married now, so we've done that navigation.
Yes,
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 you've
yes,
done
yes.
steps.
But I'm identifying this, and there may be others, and especially parents who don't know how to help their kids navigate through seasons where they're looking and they're going, okay, she's 15 years old. This is a high school thing. Your dad seemed to have a little bit more strategic perspective
Yeah.
of this could be long term, and he didn't look at it. I know we were kind of joking, like, hey, this is typical
school drama.
Like a
high
high
school
school
drama,
relationship.
and he didn't look at it like that. So
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, one of my favorite things. Well, first I'll start with my dad is my hero. My parents, I love them both so much, and
Same.
they're truly incredible. Yeah, they're just such a blessing to us. But one of the things my dad always says, you know, I'm one of 3 daughters, so he always says I got to protect my princesses. And I think we, you know, now as parents of 3 girls, we realize, wow, like we are the gatekeepers to their life. And I think sometimes we're tempted to want to err on the side of friendship because that's what's going to keep the relationship. But really, what we're coming to find out, and what I saw in my dad was, you know, more than I want to be your friend, I want to be your protector. I want to protect you from anything that is going to potentially hurt you. And that's not in the sense of skinning your knee or letting your child, you know, struggle in a healthy environment. But sometimes it's protecting us from ourselves. And I think my dad really took that role seriously and does. He's so intentional and was really okay with asking me the hard questions. Is this, why do you like this guy? It wasn't, you can't like him or you can't talk to him, but tell me why.
Yeah.
And he always had and continues to have our best interest at heart.
Yeah.
So I'm so thankful that
Yep.
you know, something that he did that I love so much was each one of my sisters and I were able to date at it wasn't a certain age. It was when he thought was right for us. So when he felt that we were emotionally mature enough and that he saw that our value was really rooted in the Lord and that, you know, hopefully the other things wouldn't sway us, other temptations or other things that people would say about us. So yeah, we started dating when he said that was okay. And I love that. And clearly David checked all the boxes on his list.
Yeah.
So he felt very like,
Did he, and I'm sure your mom as well, did they stay, like, how did that look even while y'all were dating? Were they actively involved, holding you accountable?
Yeah.
Or was it kind of like, hey, they're dating now? I'm sure this isn't the case, but some parents may think this way. hey, they're teenagers now, they can drive, we're kind of hands off, what can we do?
Yeah.
Or were they more involved? What was their approach?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's so easy to be like, well, they're together and they're great kids and they're going to do the right thing.
Right.
But hey, we're kids, you know,
Right.
our hormones are
Yeah.
raging. And just because you love Jesus and you are good kids doesn't mean you're excluded from temptation.
Yeah. Right.
And so we had their hands, honestly, I think went on a little bit harder. And I'm really thankful for that. They were very much, nobody's home alone.
Yeah.
You're always with people.
Yeah.
I think we went on a couple dates, just the two of us, but we
Yeah.
never like went back to the house alone.
Yeah.
We tried to do things
We
predominantly.
tried to beat them there, but they.
but it was always by
too
like
fast.
2 minutes. But
Well, I'll say I
Yeah,
think
you speak into it.
the biggest impact was Frank, her dad, basically discipled me, which is obviously very rare. I
Yeah.
think we had a rare,
a
you
very
know,
rare
Unique.
relationship.
Yeah,
Unique.
very
That's
dynamic.
a perfect word.
unique dynamic.
Yeah.
But you know, the Lord used kind of a culmination of Frank and Pastor Robert at Gateway and Mikayla, all in this season of my life, to bring me closer to Jesus. And Frank was the first person that when I went out to coffee with him, you know, I kind of knew him. He's like a 6'2" Italian. Like he,
Yeah, his hands are like
yeah. The
mitts.
first time I shook his hand like ate mine, and I was like, oh my goodness.
All my friends would joke like, "Did you shake Mr. Corbo's hand?"
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But the
A little
first time,
intimidating.
yeah,
Yeah, just a
totally.
smidge.
So I go out to coffee with him, and now I'm, you know, the boyfriend, which you know,
Because you have been family friends up to that point.
family friend. So like I felt comfortable.
And he had gone
around
to
him.
bat for you, so he
Yes.
has some
So
high
I knew
expectations.
he had me, but at the same time, I'm like, well, now I just changed positions.
Uh-huh,
Now
exactly.
I'm boyfriend, and I'm pretty sure there's like something in a father's heart that you
Yeah.
know wants to kill
Has
me.
to hate you just a little. No,
Yeah. But I go out to coffee with him, and he brings his Bible, and I'd never been to lunch or coffee with someone where they brought their Bible.
Wow.
And I consider myself a good Christian, not even like I was a good
You were a good
Christian, and
And you
I
didn't bring your Bible.
never read the Bible. No, because I went to the way that my story with my faith is I was in church all the time, and I was at a seeker church for a lot of my middle school, high school career, and I heard
Career.
basically my career. I graduated. It was great. I went to a seeker type church, and so I could basically knew all of the go-to stories.
Right.
So I convinced myself I knew the whole Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this is the pastor. He's sharing the same 5-6 stories. I know what he's going to say. So ipso facto, I know the whole Bible. And when I went to Gateway, heard Pastor Robert the first time, that's when I was like, oh, he brought up the Old Testament. Like, I was not prepared for this.
I was not prepared for this.
And then I go
I
to...
don't know this one.
And
lunch
it
with
wasn't
Frank.
Noah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it wasn't in John. I was like, what? There's other books. And then I go to lunch with Frank, and he's opening his Bible, and he's like, well, that just reminds me. And he put his glasses on, and and every page is underlined. And I was like, he actually reads it?
He reads it.
So it just started this faith journey of, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
And so I think throughout the whole process of a relationship, he was not only parenting her, but he was discipling me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The intent, what strikes me about it, and I had no idea where we're going in the story, but your dad is really sticking out in this as a real hero of intentionality
Yeah.
and seeing the development of our children and that our job shifts, but it and the shifting of the role is not so on and off switch. Like it goes from, hey, I'm parenting and I'm involved and my kids are little, I'm controlling everything, to, hey, now they're at an age where they make their own decisions, and so I'm now out. There's this evolution of the kind of parent that you are,
Yeah.
and how to be involved with your child as they grow up. And those teenage years are really sort of an awkward time as a parent to go, how do I relate to my kid in this season? I think a lot of people struggle with how involved they should be, and I think your dad provides a great example of, okay, so now not only am I given like approval, okay, go ahead and date this guy, but I'm now moving into role of, hey, I'm going to actually become a mentor to this guy as well. And
Totally.
that's a massive
And what
lesson.
I'm finding, your story is unique because even from 7th and 8th grade, like there was just something inside of you that knew she was the one, even from a very young age, but that's not always the case. And so as parents, it's been an interesting thing, and there may be some that are watching where some don't even agree that at 15, 16, kids should even be dating,
Yeah.
especially if you're thinking nobody's getting married. They're not really finding the person they're marrying until they're 23, 27, 30, whatever. So why, and so it's an interesting thought to have a dad who embraced so much so that, hey, this really could be a forever thing. I'm going to invest in him, because you really didn't know at that time. And I think there is that school of thought of, you're not finding your spouse is probably not your high school boyfriend.
Yeah.
So let's not make this too serious. Let's move on. Let's get into college. Let's, that kind of.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and something you mentioned at the beginning was like, the generation, 2 generations present.
Yeah.
And that's something we've talked a lot about is bridging the gap in those generations. And we were just talking to some friends about it at dinner. And one of the things that stood out to us was, like you said, our parents realizing that our high school drama was a big deal for us and stepped into it with us and helped us navigate it like it was the biggest problem of our lives, which at the time it was. And I think a lot of times we can downplay it of like, well, that's high school drama, and kind of shoo it aside. But that doesn't develop the person. That doesn't develop the way that they think or their character or anything. So
Exactly.
And it's really insightful to hear you say that, because really no matter what, a teenager's going through, the parent's job is to help them navigate that situation in a way that equips them for life, because life will continue throwing things at them. And if you overlook what they're going through when they're 15, 16, 17, as if, this is just a teenage thing, then you're missing a real opportunity to equip them with whatever they need, the tools they need to be able to navigate life in any relationship, not just a dating one.
Well, and I have to do it with our 5-year-old, because it, if there's ever a frivolous problem, it can feel like, well, my princess toy, his arm came off, or, I've listened to a comedian who was like, when a kid loses a balloon and they freak out, we're like, we'll buy you another one. He's like, but what if your wallet just started floating into the air?
Right.
And we're like, we'll buy you another wallet. And it's like, I want that one.
That's the only one I've ever loved.
And so it's like, but that's something Mikayla's so good at as a parent, is she steps into their world and
So good.
feels what they're feeling and plays in their imagination land and just makes it a big deal. And that's something that she's taught me and is continuing to teach me, because I can, it's just a balloon, we'll get another one, where let's not cry about this. But it's like, is that her whole world? How big of a deal is this balloon in the limited amount of time she's been on Earth, and how precious she, is looking at this balloon.
Right.
So I think that's something that we're supposed to try to learn now and carry that into middle school, high school. I want to be that kind of parent.
And how to be the kind that knows how to adapt at every stage of the way. So talk about your kids real quick.
Well, we have 3 girls, which is so special because I'm the oldest of 3 girls. And it wasn't like I ever prayed specifically, Lord, when we have kids, can I please have 3 girls? It was just this thing I always really hoped for, like deep in my heart. And then getting to have 3 girls has been so special. My sisters and I are really close, and seeing them and their relationship grow is so special. But our oldest is Kaya, and she's 5. And then Joy is our middle, and she's 3. And Winnie is our youngest, and she's 7 months. And they're so precious.
So precious. Your family is just the cutest thing ever.
It's true.
It's dance parties all day, every day, and princess clothes. I think we have about 7 outfit changes a day.
Of course.
It's just, you know how it is. You have 2 girls, so it's just
How does
girl
David
time.
look in a tutu?
Really good.
I was wearing a crown and heart glasses the other day. It was great.
You seem like you'd be a good girl dad.
I wanted to be a girl dad.
Did you?
Yeah, people are like, oh, you want that boy? You want that boy? And, I'd love a boy, but if I didn't have a girl, I'd be mad.
Yeah.
So I needed to have at least one girl, and the Lord was like, we're going to keep them coming.
Yeah, we feel so blessed. They're
I
so
love
fun.
that. So before the podcast, so our oldest daughter, we also have 3 kids, and our oldest, Olivia, got married this past June. And so I happened to be on the phone with her before showing up, and I just said, she loves you guys. Absolutely. All my kids do.
The feeling's mutual.
And just to affirm that, I just want you to say we have 3 kids who they grew up in church, and they all have all desired to find that one that God has for them. And they've all made good choices to, really try to seek the Lord on that matter. But you guys have been a real influence. And so in case you're just ever wondering, like,
Thank you.
are people watching? I mean, we have 23, 20, and almost 18, and all of them love you guys, have watched you guys. In fact, we even have one child who would not be that mad if his life kind of modeled your life. So it's just, I just want to affirm you. Thank you for being that kind of example to a younger generation. But to say all that, I was talking to Olivia, our oldest, before coming and just saying, we're going to be on the podcast with David and Mikayla. What kind of question do you have? And what I found now that we're talking about parenting is she said, and they're not really ready to have kids yet, but she said, I would love to know their perspective on, kind of how she said it is, Mom, you guys are older and probably maybe didn't deal with some of the same things that this generation deals with, which is true. I mean, when we got married, marriage is hard no matter what generation you're married in. It's hard. But we did have less things distracting us. We had less things, I feel like, in our world that could be at odds with trying to have a healthy, godly marriage. Yeah. And I think one of her questions, her thought was, what would they say about, being married in today's culture, and especially when maybe marriage is, being assaulted in a lot of ways. Yeah. And then not only that, but the idea of having kids and having to raise godly kids in a culture that doesn't feel like it celebrates that. Yeah. How would you answer that?
That's such a good question. Mm-hmm. Do you want to start?
Well, I would tell her, a wise woman once told me, you don't raise good kids, you raise good adults. And it was your mom.
That was a Blynda Lane quote that we have held on to for years.
Aww. And I know I told you this
yes,
a few months ago.
Yes.
But I'll never forget when you came and spoke to our team. That was one of the things you said, and I latched onto it, and I brought it up multiple times.
And we still talk about it.
Because my mom asked me that same question. Similar, just like, man, raising kids today, not all of my siblings have had kids yet. And there's kind of a trepidation. Well, in today's culture, is that really the best thing? And what kind of life are they going to have? And my response was, well, I'm not raising kids, I'm raising adults. And that perspective changes because when they're kids, and if they're kids or perpetual kids, you just want to protect their innocence forever.
Right.
And you look at today's world and you're like, they're going to come crashing into that bubble and what's going to happen. Yeah. But if you have the perspective that they're only kids for a season, and it's actually a pretty short season given, hopefully
the longevity of their life,
then we should be raising warriors and kingdom builders to go into that world and make an impact and make a difference.
That's right.
So
that's so good.
That's the kids' answer. The marriage one, is similar, but I think marriage, by definition, biblical definition, is meant to be a covenant. It's hard. There's mutual blessing in it, but there's also mutual sacrifice. And vows are some of the most sobering kind of downers at a wedding if you really pay attention to them, because it's better or worse. Sickness or in health.
Such extremes.
Such extremes. But when you say it with a smile on your face and you look beautiful, then you kind of just, skip over that
so
part.
sweet.
Rich or poor.
Rich or poor, whatever.
It's fine if you look like that.
But, marriage, I remember I heard a pastor tell me one time, if I was not a believer in the Bible, you couldn't convince me to get married. And the first thought I had was like, blasphemy, no. But then I started thinking about it and realized, he's totally right. Yeah. Because God's kind of setting you up for failure in the sense of this is not about you. Yep. This is about completely laying your life down and serving somebody else. I'm joining you together as one, and you're going to still have two minds though, and going to want to do your own thing, but I'm bringing you together. And so from a secular perspective, it's like, why would I want that? Right. I'd rather just live with somebody, and then, when the divorce rate's 50-50, 50-50 chance this thing ends, I don't have to give them half. Yep. So marriage really doesn't make sense from just a secular worldview. It only makes sense when the God of the world is trying to to root something out of us, root out pride, root out arrogance, and help us die to ourselves and come to a unity.
One of the things I talk about when I've done weddings, one of the points I have is that marriage is death.
Yes.
Now, that's not really encouraging in the midst of the wedding ceremony itself.
Who brought the downer pastor in this wedding?
He's not asked often to do that.
Exactly. Once or twice, that's it. But I sort of make it a funny thing just to say it in that way. But it's because in the context of everything else in our Christian faith, which is about denying of self and laying down our lives, and marriage carries right into that. And you can't really have the right context of marriage outside of already the context of dying to self.
Absolutely.
Which the point has to be made, which we know God's ways work. So when people are
Yes.
listening, thinking, well, then why would I ever want to do this? But what we know is the immense blessing that comes when a life is submitted to losing your life, one, for the gospel, and then two, for the other that you're married to.
When you look at it,
Oh, no, go ahead. I just think when you even look at the picture of getting married, you walk down the aisle to the altar. And if we think about what an altar even looks like, you are actually walking to where something is sacrificed.
That's right.
So as we walk down the aisle, we make it to the pulpit, or where you exchange your vows, you are literally standing in what should be representing the place where you die,
Dying to self.
where animals die, but where you die to self and where you die to your spouse and ask the Holy Spirit, you're going to have to come and live through me, but my flesh is gone. And I think that is something that can make marriage, I think that's always something that is challenging in marriage, but especially when you're first getting married, because you've never had to die to self really before and put somebody else's needs before yourself or their desires or what's best for the unit, not just necessarily for yourself. And so I think that's what can make it challenging, sometimes scary and daunting, is because you're entering into something totally new and foreign that you haven't really had to practice as much. Maybe if you're a believer prior to getting married, you've started to walk in that, but getting married is kind of like the physical representation, I think, of that.
It's a great analogy and great visual. Kind of the way you were saying is you enter into this marriage and it's all just bliss and amazing, and there's this honeymoon phase. But how was it for you guys, that first point of conflict, or that first argument, or the first realization that, whoa, what have I done? Because this person isn't doing it the way I want them to do it.
Totally.
How did you learn to resolve that?
I think marriage is death by 1,000 paper cuts, and so
I'm going to incorporate that into my next marriage.
Well, because I think
People are really going to rush to the altar to get married after this podcast. Let's get married. This sounds fun.
And I think it's good because when I heard "die to yourself" or "lay your life down for your spouse," I was like, "Yeah, I'm the protector, and I'm gonna, if worse comes to worse, I'm gonna dive in front of the bullet." As if we were going to war. When I was actually married, I realized I'm already tucked in bed. I'm on the verge of sleep, and she's like, "Could you just turn it up a degree?" And I'm like,
And
"A
I'm so
degree?"
bad at that.
And then I turn it up, and she's like, "It's hot in here." And I'm like, "Well, you said turn it up." And she's like, "I meant turn up the cold." And I was like,
This is a direct
actual conversation.
argument.
I was like, you turned down to the cold. So now I'm supposed to be a mind reader too. I'm supposed to turn up the cold.
Right. You need an interpreter.
Expectations. That's a whole other topic.
So then I realized, this is what dying to my flesh is. This is what dying to myself is. This is what, dying for her is. It's not this, grandiose, like, superhero moment. It's the little by little, I finally get back in. I turned up the cold, and she's like, "Water?" And I'm like,
I'm so bad.
But I do the same thing, for her in different ways.
In different ways.
And so I think that if that's the picture going in, then we realize, okay, it's not this, this really, again, superhero type moment. It's not
almost
this honoring thing.
Yeah, that's almost a romanticized or sort of extreme view of the laying your life down. But I like the death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah, it's the small things on a daily, regular basis that are really a part of laying your life down.
And I think it's that mindset shift that's, I get to do this, not like, I have to do this. Because I think that's where the enemy really wants to, like, slide in bitterness or frustration or starting to create a frustrated narrative in your mind. But that's where you say, I signed up for this.
Yeah.
It's my blessing, my joy that I get to do this. Do we feel like that every night? No. When I ask you to turn up or down the temperature
Have we got
of the
the right
thermostat.
terminology now? Is that
We're
worked
working
out?
on
No,
nicely?
no.
8 years in and we're not
He just
there
knows
yet.
how to read your mind now better.
Yeah.
Yes,
You know,
he does.
like,
He's like,
which one are you
it's
feeling?
winter. I think she wants it warmer.
Yeah, are you shivering or are you
Yes.
sweating?
What are we? But to be realistic, our first couple years of marriage, maybe weren't as hard, I think, as maybe for others because we had been together 4.5 years before we even tied the knot. So a lot of our communication was kind of worked out during that time.
Sure.
But, I mean, marriage is just
But I
whole
want to ask you
other
this, though, kind of a little change
Yeah.
of gears, but, when you're saying it might have been worked out or a little easier for whatever, I also wonder, you got married young,
Yeah.
and so certainly people can have baggage at 20,
Yeah.
but it's a way different kind of baggage than at 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of in a culture that isn't celebrating getting married young.
Yeah.
And so, like, talk to that, I don't know if you guys now at about 30, you've got friends and you probably people that have waited to get married or whatever. I kind of want to ask it this way, but you're not going to answer this because have you ever regretted getting married young? That's not the real question.
Yeah.
The question is help people who might be struggling to go like, man, have I lost something in experiencing life?
Yeah.
If I get married young, and what do I miss in my 20s?
Yeah.
And here you guys have done that.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
Well, we painted a pretty grim picture of marriage, so now let's paint the other one. I think when I look at it, and I try to look at it from God's perspective of what he was trying to do, it is pretty beautiful when you think about the way that marriage is supposed to work is two people who lay their lives down to serve the other. And if that happens, then I get everything that I need, but I'm never having to be selfish.
Yeah.
Like, that's beautiful.
Yes.
Two people getting their needs met, but not being selfish.
Yes.
So marriage in that way is beautiful. Getting to there is hard.
Yes.
But when you get there, it is the biggest blessing of the world because I get my needs met and I'm not having to selfishly get my needs met or
Yes.
thinking about me.
Yeah.
I just focus on her and knowing she's focusing on me.
That's right.
So
great.
that's the blessing in marriage. And I think the blessing in getting married young is you get to, one, start sooner. But not only do you start sooner, you get to experience life together
Yeah.
for longer.
Yeah.
And you experience some of those monumental moments that you probably would have had by yourself or with friends.
Yeah.
You get to have it with the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with.
That's right.
That's right.
So
And-
that's the huge blessing to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
used
and-
to say, I know we would talk to people who maybe waited to get married, and there's two schools of thoughts, right? There's the one of, I want to have my career, and I want to
Yeah.
have financial stability, and I want to have all these boxes checked before
Yeah.
I even think about making that commitment.
Which we didn't.
And that's not it's not wrong or
No,
right,
no.
but the way that my heart and God just knew how I was bent was, I love that I can be 28 years in and look and see that anything I have or anything I've built or anything, and we all know God's done it, but
Yeah.
anything that
Christ.
like that, he's a part of every bit of it.
Totally.
We did everything together.
Totally.
We the good, the bad, the ugly, the hard times, the good times, we were in it together. And I think that's a really beautiful thing too. I was going to say though, earlier, whenever I asked about the conflict and that sort of thing, because our story is a little bit different in that we dated, engaged, and married in 1 year. But we were 21 and 22.
Yeah. So we were about the same age.
Yeah.
We were way more seasoned, having a year
Yeah, I mean,
ahead of where you guys
Yeah,
were.
21, 22, we were just so, but what's interesting, the dynamic that's interesting is when you date, engage, and marry in 1 year,
Yeah.
you barely know each other. Really.
You're like
You're
foot on the
basically
gas.
marrying one step up from a stranger. and so our first few years dynamic, it felt very different than what I'm hearing you're saying, that you
Yeah.
had all this friendship in these years and
Yeah.
mentoring with the dad. And,
Yeah, totally.
ours was, hi, I'm Blynda, nice to meet you. We're committed for life.
I have a different perspective. We had a little bit more of a relationship
Okay,
than that.
of course we did.
but
In hindsight, though, when I think we've been married 28 years, but we've really only been together 29, when they
Right.
could say they've been married how many?
8
7,
Eight
but
and
you've
a
been
half,
together
yeah.
like 16. I mean, it's
Yeah.
quite a different, quite a different thing.
Good point.
And so I
love
think there were things in marriage, we were working things out in those first few years that maybe felt a lot more like conflict because you're figuring
Yeah,
out
you're
each
trying to
other
figure it out.
versus this history, you
Right.
know.
Right. Yeah, I think for sure there's those who are, when they get married young, life seems, there's the world's ahead of you and there's a lot of great things. And that was our desire. We saw the opportunity to build, and that was going to be really easy to do because we had, an iron to our name?
That's about it.
That was it?
Yeah, we were so thankful for wedding
We were
showers,
similar.
bridal showers,
Yeah.
because we basically had an iron before any of the showers. That
Yeah.
was it.
You remember those days too?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the building, but you realize the building is so much more than the stuff or even family you're building. It's
Yeah.
the drawing nearer in oneness to each other
Yes.
that you're
Yeah.
building. You're
And
building.
who you're becoming. I'm nothing outside of you now. Like my
Yeah.
life, there's not a part of me that is something Blynda outside of
Yeah.
you.
What I feel like I realized maybe about 7 or 8 years into marriage, maybe not that far, maybe 3 or 4, as you start on your wedding day, and I look at it and it's like that's when, at that moment, it's the closest knitted your heart is to that point. It's the wedding day, becoming one,
Yeah.
and from that point on, the enemy is at work to pull you apart.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so what happens is you start together like this. Here's a starting line. This is the wedding
Yeah.
day. You start like this, and over time,
Wow.
the enemy pulls you like this. Life does, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
And you can get 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and suddenly you look like this. And what you've got to build into the habit and practice of your life is adjustments that bring us
Yeah,
back
Totally.
to that oneness, and that's the growing together.
That's
And
so
so
good.
life then, you've got to go like this, and this is the path you thought you were on, but suddenly you're like this, and so this person goes, hey, we're going to go over here, and this is what makes us like this, and your life begins to navigate like
Yeah.
this. I think a lot of times what happens in people is they find themselves here, and neither one are willing to make that sacrifice to go
Well,
back
because to
towards
get
each other.
there, those that we were talking about death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
It's also separation by these subtleties,
Yeah.
thousands
Wow.
of subtleties that you don't even
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Ways that you give up unity, or ways that you give up things because something bigger is calling on
Yeah.
your attention. Maybe a new job that you
Yeah.
take, or a new position that requires a lot, or now the kids require all of us, and our marriage becomes about the kids and not about
Yeah.
each other. I mean, there's so many little subtleties that then you take a step back at 5 years and you're like,
I don't even know this
Yeah.
person.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Who are you?
I don't know
Yeah.
this person. And it was always something that it was important for us, for the kids to see.
Yeah.
It was always important for them to know, hey, we love you guys. You are our world, but we don't love you more than we love each other.
Yeah.
And we are the priority. And we always felt like that was actually the best way to create safety for our kids,
Absolutely.
is for them to have the security of knowing mom and dad.
Yes.
Because we kind of say, we were us before y'all were even here, and we're going to be us when y'all leave. So
Yeah.
us is the priority.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah,
good.
exactly. And I think the risk is that people find themselves and the gap becomes too wide, and they don't know how to close it. And I think the pull can a lot of times be, you got 3 kids,
Yep.
and now mom's giving a lot of attention to the kids, and
Yeah.
dad's trying to figure out, how do I navigate being a husband and a dad, and I got these other interests, and pursuing my career or whatever that looks like, and you find yourself here. So for you guys, watching you navigate sort of a calling to marriages. I know, talking to you, David, and I think it's both of you, but you've got a responsibility at the church, at Gateway Church in the Center for Israel. So you got a passion for Jewish people, and you've got a passion for youth and students and
Yeah.
young adults, and you got a passion for marriages.
Yep.
So as you guys are navigating all that together as a couple, how are you navigating all that together and not finding yourself kind of pulled apart?
Because just in case you haven't been told, that's a lot. Y'all carry a lot.
Thank you.
It's a lot.
I think sometimes I feel like I'm a kid raising kids sometimes. And I know that we're not. But there is that reality that every day you're just figuring it out. And I don't want to paint a picture like we have it all figured out, because truly every day we're learning. We feel so blessed to have wonderful parents that have been so helpful and influential. Y'all, so many beautiful people that we're able to look to and go, ooh, I really like what they did. We should try that. Instead of kind of, God doesn't want us to do life alone. So as we're navigating parenting, we shouldn't do that isolated either. Because if we can just implement those things that y'all have learned earlier, it saves us so much time and work trying to figure it out. But we're trying to navigate it every day. I mean, there's months where like, man, I don't know if we got a date night in. Maybe we did it differently at home or something. But man, that's something we need to put more emphasis on. I think it's just trial and error, and really feeling kind of your relationship and going, am I feeling resistance in this area? Is this working? And you're always just kind of making these slight adjustments until you feel what really works the best.
Well, I think something for me that to answer your question about like navigating those three areas and all the things that we feel like God's called us to do, I always liked solo sports better than team sports. I didn't like to rely on a team. I realize now it was very good for me to have those learning experiences. But I did Taekwondo for years and Muay Thai, and I always felt better knowing I'm in control and I can do this. I don't have to rely on some guy making a block where I get killed because he forgot. And I think I had that mentality in ministry early on that like this is I have to do it, and it's going to be me, and it's going to all fall on my shoulders, and as long as I can stand it. And I think pretty early on in the first couple years of marriage, I had to realize, I think the Lord showed me we're so much stronger together. And I think as he was teaching me that I'm actually better with Mikayla, and one of the ways that came out is I would counsel with a student. I was a student pastor for 7 years, and I would just boom, this, boom, okay, you're dealing with this, boom, do this, boom. And then she would come into one of the meetings, if it was like a female student or something, and she'd be like, well, first, can I just say, I'm so sorry? And I'd be like, that's really good. I should probably start leading with that.
Let me write that down.
And I would say something, and she'd be like, but, we don't need to be legalistic about it. And I'd be like, well, yeah, obviously, but I didn't say that. So they could have easily taken what I was saying as legalism.
Right.
And I realized I need her in every meeting that she can come to, because we are so much better together than as individuals. So he was teaching me that, and I think I'd love for you to talk about the journey the Lord had you on of not standing behind.
Well, there's many people that we encounter in our life, and we had a relationship with some people that there was a lot of like hard things I think that were spoken over me. And one of those was like, hey, it's just better if you don't say anything, because then you can't taint David's future and where he's going. And so I didn't realize, but I just took my hand, put it over my mouth, and stood back and thought, you know what, he's so much better when he just leads how he does, he speaks how he does. And it would just be a lot better if I just kind of like didn't say that much, and I was just supportive. And as the Lord continued to work on my heart while he's doing this work in David, he really pushed me into a situation where he was like, why aren't you? Like, I created you guys to do life together, not just like David doing it and you just clapping. Like, he is who he is because of you, and vice versa. And we were at a marriage conference, and I felt the Lord just say, it's time to get out from behind your husband, get out from behind David, and you need to stand beside him. That's how I created marriage, is for you guys to do it together, not David, and then you kind of just following behind him. You guys need to lead together and lead in this. And so it's been definitely a journey learning how to stand next to you and lead with confidence and assurance, but realizing we're better together. And that's just a lie from the enemy that I can mess that up. Of course, we all actually, everything we have in life, I want to say it like this, we could lose in an instant. Our happy marriage, it's just one decision from losing everything you love.
So
and I think we just have to live like that. I know that I have that availability, to taint what we have. And the same for him. And, we don't want to lose that. And so I realized, this is a risk that's always going to be there. It's better that we just do it together than
Well, knowing,
It's so
knowing the two
beautiful.
of you, I would say the one more at risk is David. I mean, I've heard you talk, and you're fine, Mikayla.
Yeah.
So what's going to come out of David's mouth?
Yeah,
You
I
just
don't
never
even know.
So-
Nobody knows. But
No, it's so
Mikayla, I
sweet.
just want to affirm you because one, what a beautiful revelation, because even thinking about, us being the bride
Yeah.
of Christ, he could have done everything on his own, but he chose to partner with us. He wants that. And so what a beautiful picture in marriage that it's a partnership and you have so much to offer. And really David's ministry that God calls him to really won't ever be to the degree that it could be until you have the revelation of what God wants to do through you, because it is a partnership that he's created. And I love that. And you do have such a voice that I think women need to hear and teen girls need to hear. And because it would have been really easy, I think, to have just almost in a false humility way been like, I'm just the supportive wife. I'm just, people could have just admired you for just being no, I just smile and support him. And if that's your personality and if that's what you
Yeah.
want to do, that's fine. But you knew that wasn't who you
Yes.
were. There
I
was
knew
more
that
in
really-
you, and that was being stifled. And I
Sure.
love that the fear of man did not, isn't what won out here, and that you just allowed the Lord to do that in you.
Thank you so much.
Well, I wanted to ask you guys some questions. I don't want to make.
I'm sorry, it's time to wrap up the podcast now, David. No.
I don't mean to make the hardest pivot of all time, but when you invited us on this podcast, which
Yes.
by the way we're so thankful
Oh,
to be
so
here.
glad you're here.
The questions that I usually keep in a folder for you or just text you, I've been saving.
Okay,
Yes.
excellent.
Because I was
How
like,
do
good.
you make
now-
a puffer
go.
vest look so
Get
good?
ready.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
that one of
Where
them?
do I buy all my
That's
puffer vests?
number
Yeah.
I'll
one
send you the
question.
link.
Yeah, I almost wore my vest because I felt like the Lane anointing
Yes.
Comes with the vest.
with
doesn't
the
fall
vest.
as
It comes
thick
with the vest.
if the vest isn't on. But so this is kind of spitfire questions.
Okay, boom,
I
spit.
don't know how I'm going to try to
Weave
create
it together?
Yeah,
That's all right,
let's
great.
just forget it.
Just random fire.
So we were talking a few weeks ago about having a family value or family values.
Yep.
Because we had some friends when we were growing up, they had it on their wall.
Yep.
And they could, verbatim, the kids could, chant it.
Recite it.
They have songs. It's so cute.
Oh, wow.
That's
Yeah. So you have that end of the spectrum.
Yep.
And then you have the other end, which is like, you don't say them, you feel them.
Exactly. You just know it when
You
you
just
feel
know
it.
them when you feel it.
Yeah.
This is
And
our
so.
culture at home. Yeah.
So I was like, I need to ask Todd, where did the lanes fall?
Yeah.
Where did you fall between those lanes?
Between those lanes. There you
And
go.
like it.
And how solidified were those values? Did that change over time?
Yeah.
Yep. What was that like?
Well, definitely started with my parents, who did a good job creating that sort of culture. I would say growing up, we had a sort of a one-liner that was kind of like our values at the beginning that my dad talked about, my parents. But Dad would say, you're either an influence or you're being influenced. So go out and be an influence.
That's good.
And so that was the culture. And we had that as a perspective. And a lot of then was the navigating I would say a lot of the feeling. But as we got older, we sort of moved into, we better write these things down and let's put that on paper. So we did that. And once all of my siblings got married, as a family, we wrote down 5 statements that reflect our values, and we put them on a wall. We signed
We all
them.
signed it like a contract.
Yeah.
So is this just your family? Is it extended
No,
family
they-
too?
It's extended
Extended.
family. It's
For
like my
all of your families.
all my siblings and everything. So
Wow.
So
And
then,
we all have the framed version of it
Wow.
in our homes on a wall.
We might need to get a copy.
oh, we can get you a copy.
We'll get you a copy.
Absolutely. So that's something we talk about. I don't know that anyone recites it. There's certainly no songs, although that's a new thing.
It's
We're gonna
coming.
create a song.
We have got to do a song.
We'll definitely have a song about that now. And so, but what we found the challenge was, okay, so we did that as adults, but how do we cascade that into our children?
Yeah.
Because those values, they represent about having a lasting marriage and having joy in our lives and
Being part of
being part of a
church.
local church and being in the community. Those are what those values are about. So we started going, well, how do we make this relevant for our kids? And so we
Yeah.
actually had a couple that were friends of ours, and we had lived in New Zealand for a couple of years, and we were now back in the States, and they came over to visit us, and they had just started having kids, and they started telling us about something. We were like, oh, this makes sense. They go, yeah, we have a list of values 1 through 5, and when our kids basically break one of those values, we discipline based on the values. And so their kids are like 3, 4 years old, and they're like, okay, Goldie, you broke number 3. What's number 3? And the child would recite the value number 3, and then they would have a discipline or a consequence around it. So we looked at it as an opportunity to go, let's take the values that have been more in language of adults and put them down in language for our kids. So we called them our Lane family commitments, and we created 5 statements that kids can understand.
Yeah.
And the goal of it was create commitments that they can understand as children, so that as they get older, those commitments transition into values, and they understand, oh, I've already been guided by something in my life.
Yeah.
And held accountable to something.
And held accountable
So
to
good.
it. And so I know what it looks like to have something that guides me.
Yeah.
Because that's what values do. Values are like, what guides me in life? By what standard do I make decisions, and do I go throughout life? That's really what values do.
And not only that, but because it started with the bigger family, not just our immediate family, but it cascaded down to our immediate family, to our kids. It always gave our kids a sense that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. They're a part of even something bigger than just our immediate family. This accountability, even though these are in kid language, they are accountable to their parents, but now their grandparents and their aunts and uncles, and and now they've got cousins that will be looking up to them.
Yeah.
We always wanted to create this sense with our kids that you have a lot to offer this world. You're an amazing thing, but you're also one part of a bigger picture, and you're always a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
And family values, establishing those that every cousin can know, every adult can know, just creates this symmetry in the family of, hey, we're all in this together, but there's a standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I will say I feel like, because you may have, especially, I'm still intrigued by the songs. So you have a family who like set a new bar here on everything. And I feel like there are those people who are really good, and they may break it down. And I tried this probably when our kids were maybe in, I don't know, 6, 8, and 10 or so. And I'm like, I got to turn these values into like weekly action items, and I got to turn this into like a calendar kind of thing. So I would go away, we had a process where I would go away for a couple of days of like a vision for just like me for like the year and I would write out, and I put like 2 pages together of all this stuff and all this detail. It never came to be.
Yeah.
It was like,
I'm like, you do understand they're 6, 8, and 10, right?
And I think what I look, and maybe to encourage somebody out there who may go, values and how to implement, it was a mixture, back to your original question, a mixture of like, hey, here are some core things. Here's like 5 things. These are commitments.
Yeah.
But then it is a feeling. Like, this is who we are. And we would talk about, reinforce, hey, here's who the Lane family is. This is how we do things. Here's how we relate to people. And it wasn't so...
It really wasn't as rigid as maybe it's coming across.
Yeah, exactly. It certainly wasn't rigid.
Well, I know your dad used to have a saying like, we don't want it to be a framed nothing.
Yeah, well, framed whatever.
A framed whatever, that's what it was.
Yeah, we talk about that just in general when it comes to culture, like in your family or in an organization.
Yeah.
And we talk about the risk of creating values, but then not ever talking about them, certainly not living by them, is you've created something, so you frame it and you go, woohoo, we feel good about ourselves because we framed it. But then you get down the line and people go, what's that about? It's like, well, I don't know, whatever. So it's now become a framed whatever. And
That's
so
so good.
the reality of being able to make it part of a conversation.
Yeah.
But the rigid side, I think, is where we're just, as a family, we're very relational.
Very relational and intentional.
So we're intentional. That comes in the, hey, here are the values, here are the commitments.
Yeah.
But then also relational and how they're applied, how we talk about them. And I think it's worked so that our kids, and certainly our broader family under those values, have understood it. They understand our family, but it's also not such that they're feeling like we blow whistles and march 2, 3.
Yeah. If you're in a Blynda household, if there's not a lot of fun involved as well, it's not going to go over well with me. So,
which is somewhat why my 2 pages did never come to fruition. I was
like,
starting by
they're
going
not
over
even
with
colored
Blynda, and
pages.
she's like,
are you kidding?
boring.
This is why he went away for 2 days by himself. I'm like, I'm not coming along. If this is going to be
Yeah, she's like, you're going to have a vision
spreadsheets.
retreat?
How
You're on
many
your own,
Excel
buddy.
spreadsheets did you make on this 2-day trip?
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that I've always had too, that I feel like I'll probably always wrestle with, is that balance between legalism and, complete grace with no boundaries. And it's hard. And I think I wish there was, just do exactly this play and it'll work. But I'm finding that every kid is different, let alone every family and every marriage. And so I'm having to realize there isn't just a box that works. This works with every marriage. There's principles.
Right.
And I feel like that's what the Lord did, obviously. There's principles, and then how those get implemented are different.
I would love to ask the question, many people watching, I'm sure, are like, man, I'm late to the game. My kids are already 10, my kids are 8, or maybe they're teenagers and they're nearing the end of their season living with their parents. What would you tell those parents that might be feeling inspired but a little bit discouraged because they feel late? What would you tell them?
You're not late. I look at it and I go, no matter when you get information, the question is, what do I do with the information at this point? So they may not have ever thought about doing that before, it just may not be part of what has been their journey, but they get a revelation now. Well, great, you can start now. And so for some people, it might be starting as a grandparent. And you missed your kids. Well, then begin to implement it as a grandparent. One of the greatest values we have as a family is that we have grandparents speaking into our kids. I had grandparents speaking into me. Now, again, I recognize not everybody has that. So that may not be what their life holds, but this is the empowering thing. It can begin with you. It starts right now. It starts with you understanding the Do we need to pause?
So sorry.
That's all right.
That was like,
It
so
sounded
good
like,
too.
yeah, I don't
I set an alarm to get my
want
oil
a
changed because
lot
I was like at
for
1:30. There's no way we'll still be going.
Okay, I'll
Okay,
pick back up
we're
somewhere in
so
there.
sorry.
No, it's all right. No, completely.
Start now, maybe?
Yeah.
You said it's not too late.
Yeah.
It's not too-
So I think for anybody who's watching, who's experiencing something in their family and they feel discouraged, I want to turn that discouragement into empowerment.
It's really good.
You can begin right now, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be very hard. I'm going to try to rattle off our 5 commitments. This was for really as our kids were younger. We had early years, I'm talking like under 10, and then we converted them to teenage years.
I love it.
Different
That's
language.
great.
So it's like
Intentionality.
intentionality. And realizing, okay, because again, the first one when they were little, it was like, here's a commitment. We honor mommy and daddy with our words and actions. That was the number 1. Okay. So now when they're teenagers, we're not like, we're going to honor mommy and daddy. But here's the value.
It's not honoring mommy and daddy.
Here's how it transitioned. We honor others. We honor people with our words and actions. That's a value that carries on throughout life.
That's
good.
So we took those, we converted them. I will say please and thank you. That's when they were little. This is our commitment. I will say please and thank you. Older, I'm going to be content in all things. So we transitioned those to statements that reflect, okay, as I'm growing up, what is going to guide me and what's the kind of person that I want to be?
Yeah.
So my point in saying those are, it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be simple statements and I think a way to describe what are your values or what do you want your values to be are what are the things, and we all have values, whether you've articulated them or not. What I find is you've hit on a value in you when something happens and it frustrates you or it annoys you. That might be a core value.
That's good.
Now, you may then evaluate and go, I don't like that about me. Well, then you can change and have some more sort of aspirational values and go, I want to be like this. So you begin to declare it, point to it, walk towards it. But if a person wants to know, where do I begin even discovering what my values are, you'd have to take time and go, well, let me think about this. And I've found a place to start to go, is this a value? Is when this happens, do I feel frustrated? Then that usually means it sort of pricked on bumped up against a value.
Yeah.
And that's a way to
so
start.
good.
And another way
really
too, I think our litmus test is always, as a family, we want to do and be people who are known for their love for God, their love for each other, and their love
Yeah.
for others. And so if those 3 things are at the forefront, you can build a lot of values around what as a family will help us understand how to love God the most. How do we really believe his ways work? Well, we in our home, we believe the Bible. And so we live by the word of God. How can we love others? That's getting outside of the selfishness we were talking about. How can we serve our community? How can we be a part of a church where dying to self in some ways, because that's what, we're supposed to do as believers, as we serve.
Yep.
And then how do we love each other? How do we prefer somebody in our family over ourselves? How do we share the toy when it's toddlers versus, how do we,
Yeah, one of the values when they were little was, I will clean up after myself. Like I had a major problem. This goes to, how did I discover that was it? Is when the kids' rooms were a mess, they didn't clean up. I was like, apparently this is a value in me. You didn't clean up.
Because I'm super annoyed right now.
I'm really annoyed. So this is now a commitment. Well, as they got older, the value really was, what I was trying to train in them is, take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'll be responsible for things that are in my world.
Yeah.
And boy, that's something that can carry all throughout life.
Because
But
again, we are trying to raise
we're raising adults.
adults.
They happen to be children, right?
Okay, if I was listening to this podcast and you didn't finish all of them, I would feel gypped. So can you finish?
Okay, here are the 5 things. And what we're going to do is Blynda's going to tell you the ones for the early years,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you how they converted into teenagers.
I love
So
it.
go ahead. What
Okay,
are the early
so
years?
kids, yes, it would start out with, I will honor mommy and daddy with my words and actions. And then I will say please and thank you, something very simple. I will be grateful and not argue. I will love and think of others, and I will pick up after myself.
So those, when they were under 10,
I
it's
love
like,
it.
these are the things. And so we would talk about them. We would say, hey, so number 2 is we'll say please and thank you. If you want to move on to the next thing, did you say please? Did you say thank you? So as they got into the teenage years, those 5 converted to this. Number 1, I will honor others with my words and actions. Number 2, I will give my best in all that I do. Number 3, I will be grateful and content. Number 4, I will love and serve others. And number 5, I will be responsible for my actions.
So good.
So
good.
those things that, as far as the teenage years go, they really do convert into adulthood totally. It's
Yeah.
like all of those are values that I want to be guided by in my life.
Yeah.
And I want to say something too, because now that I'm hearing them as we're saying them, this is because when, like for me, I was enforcing those when they were younger all the time.
Yeah.
It's because you're living real life
Yeah.
with kids who aren't sharing toys and kids who are demanding food and not being grateful for it. And
Yeah.
You're in real life. What could feel absent if somebody hears these are these real spiritual values. And
Yeah, God was present in our discussions.
what I want to
promise.
say about that, though, is that's the overarching thing, even
Yeah.
the thing I was talking about, the bigger family thing. Like a family whose foundation is on principles of God. Of course, this is what we're instilling in them all the time. And we're part of a church, and so they're seeing it. We're living things out,
Yeah.
and they're seeing us, we're praying, we're having worship music on. Like there's all of those things that are just daily parts of who we are.
Yeah.
But some of these things weren't always reiterating these big spiritual values. They
Yeah.
were making them good humans.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we can get some values in you that are just going to make you a good human, a responsible human, one that loves
Yeah.
others, of course, the spiritual principles were always being reinstated in our
Yeah.
home as well.
Which I have a question about the spiritual side. I know we're nearing the end, but I feel like that has to be the most stressful as a parent trying to raise children and hoping and praying that they fall in love with Jesus, but not being too legalistic. Like, well, we're going to church, and I don't care what you
Yep.
think. At what age do they decide for their self? And how much do you push? And how much do you ask? Like, hey, you spent time with Jesus today? Or is there something like we're not doing
Such
anymore?
a good question.
Is that something that they just is more caught than taught? What's that balance like? And where did that strike in your family?
Yeah. Well, I would say 3 sort of progressions, I guess, in thinking about that. And that is, and I don't know exactly where to put ages on this, and sometimes it's per kid
Yeah.
where they are on this.
Right.
But with whether it's a value or a task or even their spiritual growth, there's a certain time of their life you just have to make them do it. This is what we do, and I'm going to make you do it. We go to church. You're going to go upstairs and read your Bible. You make them do it.
Yeah.
The next thing you move into, and you might still be making them do it during this next phase, but then you realize you're modeling something. And so you've got to make sure, now again, you're doing it while you're making it too, but you realize in the kid's mind, it shifts from, great, you're making me do it, but now I'm watching you.
Are you
Do
doing
you
it?
do it?
Are you doing
And so the modeling piece becomes really, really important.
Yeah.
And even more so from when you maybe disconnect from the making them do it. Because again, somewhere the age shifts and you're like, I'm going to model and I'm going to pray that they come along in that journey.
Yeah.
And then the third one, again, they all may link together, but it's really mentoring. then you're really moving into, okay, I've modeled for you, I've made you do it. Now let me mentor you as to all the why, the importance, how this plays into my life.
Yeah.
Now let me start sharing with
The
you
applicable parts
how it
of
applies and how it applied in my life. And let me tell you mistakes I made. And
Yeah.
Or not only that, but open conversation in your home about, I was reading today, in my quiet time, and the Lord really showed me this. And so then now
Yeah.
you're kind of talking more about that you're a real person that has a real life, and they can see you as somebody who has a struggle, or the Lord is still teaching
Yeah.
them, even as old as we are.
gold.
God can still teach us
Not
things.
that old.
when you start to realize, for us, a year or two that passes by, it can fly like that.
Yeah.
Well, that can represent 20% of a kid's life,
Yeah,
a year or two.
absolutely.
And you realize suddenly, like, it's moved very quickly for us, but you realize for them, a massive development season has happened. And so they're asking different questions now, or they're wanting to know new things, and they can understand it differently. And so being aware of the different developmental seasons of our kids' lives is really important, and also recognizing each of them progress at a little bit of a different, process.
And I also want to say, because you guys are in ministry, we've been in ministry, that's all of our kids know. They know Dad as a pastor of a church,
Yeah.
being a part of something like that. And there can be kind of this, what do they say, fishbowl or, glass, that where, this idea as a parent, if you give into that temptation of, hey, my kids, they're being watched and people see, the ministry that you
Yeah.
have or whatever. And so I just need to make sure that, everything's looking really
up
good.
appearances,
Yes,
yeah.
because, and I'm so thankful that early on, there was a specific story that happened. I don't know if I have time to go into it, but we were in a service at church, and there was a pastor's kid kind of across the way, and he was just prostrate on the floor, just worshiping his heart out. It was the most beautiful thing. And it was at an age where I think Olivia was maybe 10, maybe something like that. So maybe it's the 10, 8, and 6, somewhere in that again. And I think Harrison was maybe like
Carving
he was maybe carving into the
seats.
wood of the seats, and Olivia, is just counting the tiles on the whatever. And I had this thought, and we're on the front row, as we
Yeah.
normally were, and I just had this thought of, oh my goodness, look at this pastor's kid, and look at mine. They could
Prostrate yourself.
They could not be less interested in this service.
do at home.
Yes. And it was such a sweet thing that happened in that moment, because I was so glad that they were so disinterested, because God used it as a real teaching moment for me. And it didn't happen at that moment, but in a quiet time, a few days after that, the Lord said, you can teach them to be performers if you want. You can talk to them about how they need to appear because of some
Pressure you
reputation
feel,
or pressure that you feel that you need to live up to. But if you do, it will affect their authentic relationship with me the rest of their life.
Oof.
Or you
That's so
can
strong.
lay your pride down as who you think people think you need to be, as a parent, as Todd's wife, or whatever, and you can let me pursue their hearts at the pace that they're ready to receive me. And if you do that, and if you let your pride go and let them be at the place that they are, the real authentic place with me, then I will develop them and grow them into people who have authentic relationship with me. And it was such a sweet thing the Lord did in my heart to capture that when they were still young, because I feel like we can say now, they came out pretty unscathed as pastors' kids. You don't really know them even in that way.
Yep.
No. We still held a standard, but that's because
Sure.
we held the standard because we're believers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not because we're anybody in position,
Yeah,
but
totally.
because of who we are. As when we say we're Christ followers, we follow the ways of Christ. And so we have a standard, of course. But it was a really sweet moment for me, and really one that was like jolting, like the Lord really directed me. Like, this is a warning. If this is something that you allow to happen, you'll have very different kids at the end of it. And I didn't want that. I so much desired for them to be in love with Jesus
Yeah.
fully, full stop, for
Yeah.
no other reason.
Authentically, yeah.
Authentically.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
that encourages anybody
That
out
is
there.
so
That was the goal.
Well, and
That's
I guess to even wrap up that point, because I was sort of feeling like maybe there's somebody who's listening or watching, and you've struggled to know, when do I stop making them and move into the modeling? Because it could be that you're making them, and that's creating rebellion in their heart because there's a struggle. And I know that's a real tension point. Like, how long do you make them do things and God's going to have to work that out for you. I can't give you like, here's the age and here's the time that you do it. But he'll begin to reveal to you when is that moment where it's God's having his relationship established within their hearts. And that's not going to really happen until you let God have the opportunity to do it. Right now, it might be operating through you to God. And if you let God do his work and release them to him, he can actually establish the relationship with your kids.
We all have, I think we would say, we have that pursue story, the one where we can say, God really pursued my heart in this way. This moment was a pivotal, changing moment for me. We all have that. And yet, because we are also desiring to grow our kids up in this beautiful Christian environment, it's almost like we rob the Lord of that opportunity to pursue them in the same way, because we want to structure everything so well for them. A lot of it is because we would love for them to avoid any of the things, hard things that we maybe experienced, but you really can't. You have to allow the Lord they each get their own pursuit story,
Yeah. I guess I want to wrap up with sort of saying to you guys, I look at, us sitting here and we represent about, is it 20 years ahead of them? This is kind of crazy.
It's a very, very hard pill to swallow.
But I think back to us and our kids at the ages of your kids, and I just go, man, well done, guys. Y'all are doing an amazing job. And
Yes.
I think what I'm encouraged to see in you guys is you trying to steward what it looks like to reflect God's love for each other that you have, and he's reflected through you to your kids, but also God's given you a platform, and you're showing others what that looks like in a very real and authentic way, and you're celebrating each other. One of the things, back to Mikayla, when you're talking about, am I behind David or whatever, one of the things I've watched in you guys is you sort of encouraging the gifts within each other and really celebrating that. And so as I knew this would be, super fun conversation with you guys. Really enjoyed it, and fun to do it.
We love being the age we are and learning from someone so much younger than
Oh
us.
my
Yeah.
gosh, no.
It's so sweet. I love the two of you, and I love your family and what you're doing and how you really have. You've just surrendered your life to his work and his call in your life, and he's just doing so much with it. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank you
We
so
love
much.
you.
Yeah, before we wrap, I just have to say thank you all so much, because we have had the privilege to watch you guys do life with your family, and it's just been such a blessing. We both don't have family in ministry that have gone before us, and before we knew you the way that we do now, you guys are always that like pseudo ministry family to us that we were able to learn from and really just watch and admire, and we're just so thankful for the way you lead your family, the way you love each other, and the way you love the Lord, because it has made the process a lot smoother and more fun and enjoyable for us to get to do our best to walk that journey in the way the Bleases need to, but because it's been modeled in such a beautiful way.
Totally.
So thank you
Seeing
guys
you
so
guys
much.
model ministry, marriage, family, felt attainable. It felt authentic, and it didn't feel daunting. It didn't feel like we had to become different people. We could be ourselves. We could have fun. We could have fun, but our kids could come out loving Jesus, being normal, being friendly, being cool, being just being people that others wanted to be around. And you guys are people we always want to be around. So thank you for having us.
Oh,
We really
sweet.
need
I know.
Yeah,
There's so
well,
much love in this room.
That's all right. Big love fest going on
Yes,
here. Oh, look,
thank
they
you.
hug. You better hug too.
We'll cry later.
We love
Well,
you guys.
you guys, it's been awesome. We love you and proud of all that you're doing and proud of your family and excited to see what all God has for you. So, hey, guys, thanks for tuning in this week. We'll look forward to being with you at our next podcast. Let me pray us out as we go. God, thank you for our families. Thank you for the Blease family and all that you're doing. God, I pray that everyone who's listening, watching today, Lord, would have a deposit from you, Lord, that would encourage them, would help them grow, would help them see, Lord, there would be a nugget out of this conversation, Lord, that they can be inspired and challenged, not in a way that they carry anything negative or feel bad about anything, Lord, but they feel encouraged and motivated in wherever they are in their journey with you, Lord. I pray blessing on everybody watching today in Jesus' name. Amen.